The day before the wedding. I'm hiding in the wedding room. I want to give my betrothed a surprise. But then, I received an unexpected message, he told me. 3 days ago, I went to the Civil Affairs Bureau, and now I've registered with Victoria. My friends all say he's madly in love. They all praise him. Michael, you really are something, making decisions without consulting first. Then why are you still coming to the wedding? Does Emily know about this? Michael listened. He casually fiddled with his watch. His tone was clearly dismissive. Even if she knew, so what? This wedding was something she sought after herself. Victoria and I have reached an agreement to publicly acknowledge Emily's identity, but at home, she mainly takes care of our daily needs. This arrangement can be considered contentment. After all, one shouldn't ask for too much. I stood outside the room holding the hangover soup. My hands were a bit shaky. Only then did I understand why Michael insisted on having the wedding before getting the marriage certificate. I gave a bitter smile. I no longer cared about the unpleasant words from outside. I turned around and made another call. Little uncle, I don't want to marry him anymore. Emily, what are you doing here? As soon as the door opened. The man's expression was a bit awkward, but when he saw me take off my headphones, he immediately looked impatient. Didn't we agree not to see each other the day before the wedding? Why are you being so disobedient? Michael said as he spoke. He casually took off his jacket and tossed it on the floor. The cigarette in his hand was still burning. He just sat down next to me and blew a puff of smoke in my face. Seeing me cough badly from the smoke, Michael laughed smugly. You're still more interesting this way. My throat hurt like it was being torn apart. I felt a bit powerless for the first time. The person I loved for so many years suddenly became unbearable in front of me. This is what it feels like. Go make me a hangover soup. After Michael finished laughing, he lay on the bed. He pointed outside with his finger, giving me orders. This was the first time I didn't listen to him. I pulled the curtains open with force. A cold wind rushed in. I'm not your nanny. If you want to drink, go make it yourself. Upon hearing this, Michael's expression immediately turned grim. He was about to say something, but seeing the hangover soup I had prepared in advance, his furrowed brow slowly relaxed. There was a hint of smugness in his tone. Why are you so angry? Are you playing hard to get? He hadn't finished speaking. The sound of shattering glass interrupted him. Dark soup splattered onto his dress pants, quickly spreading out. Michael's eyes suddenly narrowed, so angry that my eyebrows are trembling. Emily, have I been too indulgent with you lately? Do you think that getting married tomorrow means you can do whatever you want? Even if we get married, I can still divorce you. Seeing Michael's displeased expression, I said calmly. Michael believed what I said. His tone was unfamiliar. It left him momentarily stunned. I have always been very compliant with him. In the past, every time Michael scared me with marriage, I would always admit my fault first. No matter what the truth of the matter was, I felt like I understood him. I treated him like a child who never grew up, so I have always indulged him. Sometimes I wonder, did I push him too hard? That made Michael show such a frustrated expression. But now, none of this matters anymore. I kicked Michael's coat that he threw on the ground. The phone rang. It was to discuss the arrangements for tomorrow's wedding. William unexpectedly cooperated. Of course, I have to be sensible. After all, the Smith family originally arranged for me to be with William. It's my own confusion. I insisted on following Michael. I was just about to turn around, but my wrist was grabbed by Michael. He tiredly rubbed his forehead. I understand I've been neglecting you lately, but you shouldn't be this angry with me over a few words. There's still a wedding tomorrow. Go back and get some rest early. Okay, I ignored him. I shook off his hand. Suddenly, a familiar figure walked in through the door. Victoria was still wearing the wedding dress I left at the store a few days ago. Now that I'm here, she looked a bit awkward, but her makeup was still exquisite. It seemed to declare her status. I turned in surprise to look at Michael. There wasn't a hint of unease on her face. In the first half of tomorrow's wedding, Victoria will be the bride. I didn't expect Michael to be so ruthless. Even if he doesn't love me, we shouldn't let the Johnson family lose face. Moreover, as his nominal fiancé, he actually allowed others to humiliate me. It made me the laughingstock of everyone. I looked at Michael's indifferent face with disappointment. I said coldly, Michael, you are truly unreasonable. Michael knows he did wrong. He awkwardly touched his nose. He explained to me, Emily, you also know. Victoria has followed me to New York alone for so many years. She just wants to reassure her parents now. That's why she asked me to have a wedding with her. And it's just a wedding. Don't take it too seriously. Just make sure your family doesn't come in the morning." Upon hearing this, I let out a cold laugh. After all, the reason Michael treats me so well is still because he has something to ask of me. I opened my mouth, but ultimately I didn't voice my dissatisfaction. Nothing matters anymore. Maybe my expression was too calm. Michael pursed his lips. "Promise me, don't worry. I'll perform well at the dinner tonight." I used to hear this kind of news. I would definitely keep my temper in check immediately. Smiling, I returned to Michael's side, but this time, I just gave him a cold glance. Michael looked a bit confused. He was about to say something more to me, but Victoria suddenly threw herself into his arms. Her eyes were a bit red. Her voice came out in broken sobs from Michael's embrace. "Michael, I'm sorry. I've troubled you. My family said they wanted to come see our wedding house, so I might have to stay here tonight. And speaking of which," Victoria lifted her head from Michael's embrace. Her eyes looked at me. "Emily, please tidy up the things at home." I noticed a provocative look in the other person's eyes. I just find it amusing. They have already obtained their marriage certificate, yet they still pretend in front of me. They even have their wedding outfits on, and still claim it's all an act in front of me. I think they plan to actually act like a couple tonight, but that's fine. I never intended to leave anything related to me at Michael's place. "Emily, Michael hadn't finished speaking. I impatiently interrupted him. I casually waved my hand and said, "Burn it. I don't want it anymore." After saying that, I turned and walked away, not looking back. Michael watched my back. Suddenly, he felt an indescribable emotion inside. It seemed like things were heading in a direction he couldn't predict. Talking with William went very smoothly. He seemed to be well prepared. He even knows what flowers I like, but I forgot to bring my ID, so I have to take a taxi back to the apartment in just one night. The arrangement in the room has completely changed. My things have been haphazardly stuffed into a box by the door, mixed in with the trash. I can hear Victoria's laughter from inside. She is wearing a bright red wedding dress. Michael stands quietly beside her, facing the awkwardness from my mother-in-law and brother-in-law. He still maintains a good temper. I suddenly feel a bit bored. In my memory, that arrogant young master has become as docile as a cat in front of Victoria. He has turned into an ordinary person in the crowd. Just as I bent down to pick up my ID card, Michael suddenly appeared in front of me. He grabbed my wrist and pulled me into the hallway. He lowered his voice and said, "Emily, didn't you say you wouldn't come to cause trouble?" I couldn't be bothered to talk. I just waved the ID card in my hand. Michael frowned. Since last night, he has felt something was off about me. "Emily, didn't we discuss this yesterday? You aren't thinking of backing out of the wedding, are you?" "What did we discuss?" "In the morning, it's Victoria. In the afternoon, it's my turn. He really thinks he's in a beauty pageant. I don't want to play along in this charade." I shook off his hand that was gripping my wrist tightly. I smiled politely at him. Of course not. As soon as he finished speaking, we heard a sweet, sticky voice. "Emily?" Victoria and her relatives asked. Several heads popped out from the doorway. There was a scrutinizing look in his eyes. Michael's expression darkened. He was about to give a quiet warning, but he hadn't finished his words. I smiled and walked over. I ignored Michael's surprised expression behind me. I said a few words of blessing. Before leaving, he didn't forget to pick up the box of my trash and threw it directly into the trash can in front of everyone. The box contained the paintings I had made for Michael over the years. Back then, every stroke was filled with sweetness. Now, I watch the paint crack on the canvas. Michael's face feels like this layer of disguise. It's slowly peeling away. This makes me uncomfortable. Victoria even linked arms with Michael to see me off. She looked completely like a hostess. My phone vibrated. Michael sent a message. He told me not to be angry. He said he would definitely arrive on time for the wedding in the afternoon. Actually, I had stopped being angry a long time ago. I smiled nonchalantly. I waved at Victoria. She looked at me with a smug expression. After the afternoon, she'll start calling me Auntie following Michael. I hurriedly changed into my wedding dress. I returned to my own home. William had already explained to both families. Although I'm not clear on what exactly he said, the outcome was good. My mom didn't ask much. She even praised me for choosing the right person. I smiled. After the simple wedding ceremony concluded, William took us to the hotel we had booked. I, as the bride, was arranged to stay in the lounge. My best friend whispered in my ear, "I already told you that Michael is unreliable. He has had an ambiguous relationship with Victoria for a long time. I told you, but you didn't believe me. You insisted on your own opinion. Fortunately, you stopped in time in the end." I heard. Michael had even practiced intimate techniques to pursue Victoria. I felt very uncomfortable hearing that. Fortunately, the host's voice rang out just in time. My best friend quickly grabbed my dress and led me towards the entrance of the exhibition hall. This is my first time in my life. It's a lie to say I'm not nervous. The few minutes of waiting felt particularly long. The hall was so quiet that I could hear my own heartbeat. I clenched my fists, waiting for the moment the doors would open. Suddenly, a powerful force came from behind. Victoria was standing behind me without me noticing. She twisted my arm forcefully. Her nails left long scratches on my arm. The voice shouted piercingly, "Emily, why are you wearing a wedding dress to my wedding? Do you want to take Michael away from me?" I instinctively shook off the restraints on my hands. Victoria lost her balance. She fell straight into Michael's arms. This childish trick seems ridiculous to me. I frowned and looked at Michael, indicating he should take care of his friend. Not only did she not appreciate it, but she also stepped up to question me. "Emily, what exactly are you doing? You're standing at the entrance of the hall in a wedding dress. Do you really think I will marry you?" I was almost crying with laughter. Why are these two so eager to flatter themselves? Is Michael really that sought after? He's just someone not worth paying attention to. Do I need to survive by picking up trash? I let out a cold laugh. I ignored them from then on, but Victoria refuses to give up. She rushed over to grab my wedding dress. "You can't ruin my wedding. You need to leave right now." She couldn't care less. My best friend stood in front of me, blocking her. The scene was chaotic. I didn't even notice when the door opened. Everyone turned to look at us. Victoria suddenly looked up. The expression on her face changed instantly. "Aunt and uncle, look at her. I am the daughter-in-law of the Smith family, yet she wants to steal my wedding. Emily, you must admit in front of everyone today that it was you who approached my husband first. You also wanted to use your family's influence to force a marriage." Michael stood aside. He said not a word. Only his friends, parents, and Victoria's family were in the room. There's nothing to hide. But just then, a clear male voice rang out. "Who said Emily is going to marry you?" Michael glanced at the person's face. His expression instantly shifted from disdain to panic. I noticed that their expressions were off. Slowly, the truth came out. "I'm really getting married today. This is true. It's just that the one getting married is not you." Upon hearing this, Michael, his face immediately turned pale. His gaze kept darting back and forth between me and William. After a long while, he managed to force a smile. "Emily, did you specifically bring my uncle here to make me angry? Stop messing around, okay? How could you possibly marry someone else? Didn't we agree on this long ago?" As I was saying halfway through, Michael suddenly stopped. It seemed he just realized. He had never made any promises to me. He was always cold and impatient with me. It was always me who took the initiative to maintain the relationship. This made him feel he could treat me casually. I once took 99 steps towards him. Now I no longer insist. He feels like he has been pushed to the edge of a cliff. A hint of unease was evident in Michael's eyes. Victoria noticed Michael's expression. The smile suddenly froze. She stepped forward, blocking the view. The voice shouted sharply, "Emily, what kind of trick are you playing? Are you trying to play hard to get? You think you can take Michael away from me like this and make him change his mind? Don't even think about it." I cast her a cold glance. A hint of a sarcastic smile appeared at the corner of my mouth. "Victoria, are you a bit full of yourself? Do you think everyone is like you, always pondering how to take what others don't cherish?" Perhaps my tone sounded a bit disdainful. Both of them were taken aback for a moment. Victoria's expression immediately turned unpleasant. First, there was a flash of panic in her eyes, but it quickly turned to anger. She turned around. With a sense of grievance, she grabbed Michael's arm. The voice had a hint of crying. "Michael, look at her." She leans against Michael. In situations like this usually, Michael would always stand up for her, but this time it's different. Victoria feels strange. She looks up. She finds Michael staring intently at the jade bracelet on my wrist. That is the Smith family heirloom. Grandma Smith only gave it to 2 descendants. It was said to be left for the Smith family wives in the future. I have tried several times, directly or indirectly, to get it, but Michael always found various excuses to refuse. Actually, he had quietly given the other one to Victoria long ago. He immediately recognized the origin of the other jade bracelet. Michael's expression turned even worse. His voice trembled slightly. "Emily, the jade bracelet on your hand was given to you by William." I didn't speak. I just looked at him calmly. It was as if I had tacitly acknowledged it. Michael's face suddenly turned very ugly. He suddenly grabbed my wrist. The strength was so great that I couldn't help but frown. Emily, how can you go against the marriage contract, suddenly marrying someone else? This wedding involves two families. Are you really going to change the groom just because you're angry and jealous you're being too willful? William frowned. Help me pull his hand away. I rubbed my aching wrist. I said coldly, Michael, did you forget something? Weren't you helping Victoria prepare for the wedding? Michael pressed his lips together. He explained a bit nervously. This is just an act. You know that, that's right. I not only know about this, I also know that you and Victoria are officially registered as married. You are now legally husband and wife. You are now legally married. As for me, I can marry whoever I want. This is not something you can interfere with. I'm too lazy to waste my breath on him. Just tell the truth directly. Michael's expression turned very dark after hearing that. His lips trembled slightly. In the end, he could only ask weakly, how did you know? I didn't expect that what he cared about in the end was this. I gave a bitter smile. I looked at him helplessly and said, we've talked for so long. It wasn't until the day before the wedding that I understood. In your eyes, I'm just a humble person. Weren't you planning to have me take care of you and Victoria? What, now you don't dare to admit it? I didn't. Michael hurriedly denied it, but I didn't want to hear more. I stared at him coldly. My tone was flat. Michael, we are not in a relationship anymore. Since the day you and Victoria got your marriage certificate, it's completely over for us. A hint of pain showed in Michael's eyes. This moment, he actually feels regret now. There is a hint of pleading in his voice. Emily, don't do this. I know I was wrong. I shouldn't have gotten the marriage certificate with Victoria. I have always had you in my heart. We have been looking forward to this wedding for so long. You have made so many preparations to be with me. Now we're just one step away. How can you just give up like this? Looking at Michael's red eyes, memories from the past suddenly surged to my mind. In a large family like the Smiths, someone like Michael, who is mediocre, originally had no right to marry the only daughter of the Johnson family. It was my insistence, the opportunity I begged for in front of my elders at home. After the engagement, resources began to tilt towards him. Michael smoothly became the general manager of the branch office. Only in this situation did I dare to appear in front of him. I only dare to appear in front of him. It's just to prevent him from having any psychological burden, to avoid hurting his self-esteem. I won't talk about money. I only say it's because I like it. I thought love could overcome everything, so I ran all over the city, just to find the cafe he casually mentioned. It rained heavily that day. I was completely soaked. When I handed him the coffee, he simply said thank you, and then continued chatting with his friends. He had a fever and was sick. I specifically took a leave of absence. I stayed by his bedside all night, changing his towels and giving him medicine. But when he woke up the next morning, he just coldly asked, "Why are you still here?" I used to think, as long as I work hard and give my all, he would eventually notice my worth. I always felt, the only reason to get married is that you like and love each other. I was wrong. True feelings are often overlooked by those who do not cherish them. Efforts can also be misunderstood as trying to please. Michael doesn't love me. He has always been aware of what I've done for him. It's just that he takes advantage of my feelings for him. He just wants it all. I looked at him calmly. My tone was firm. Michael, all that is in the past. I did indeed like you in the past, but that was a long time ago. As for me now, I no longer need you. Michael's face suddenly turned pale. His eyes were filled with despair and unwillingness. He suddenly grabbed my shoulders. His voice was somewhat out of control. "No, Emily, you can't do this. We still have a chance. We can start over. I won't allow you to leave me." I pushed him away with force. My tone was cold. "Michael, don't cling to me anymore. We've already broken up." William pulled me behind him in one motion. His tall figure was like a wall. "It completely shielded me," he said. "Emily is now my fiancée. You better recognize your position. I don't want to take things too far." Michael listened to this. His expression suddenly turned very grim. He rushed over. He reached out to grab me, but William quickly seized his wrist. William is very strong. Michael's face turned pale from the pain, but he still struggled and shouted defiantly, "Let go of me. Emily is mine. How could you take her away?" Victoria saw this situation. She quickly rushed forward to grab Michael's arm. Her voice was a bit choked. "Michael, don't do this. We are the couple. Don't be fooled by her." Michael suddenly broke free from Victoria's grasp. His tone was impatient. "Don't touch me. Don't touch me. Victoria was pushed hard by Michael. Her body swayed, almost fell. She looked completely surprised. Disappointment was evident in her voice. Michael, how could you treat me like this? I looked at the messy scene before me. I felt very tired inside. I was about to have the security take these two people out. Grandma Smith was already standing at the door. She spoke in a serious tone. What day is it today? What are you all arguing about here? As soon as Grandma Smith appeared, the entire scene fell silent. She leaned on a cane, but her gaze was as sharp as a knife. Michael's face turned pale all of a sudden. He didn't expect Grandma to come in person. Since Grandpa Smith passed away, the entire family has been under her control. His lips trembled slightly. His voice was a bit shaky. Grandma, why are you here? Victoria was unclear about Grandma Smith's identity. She was holding in a surge of anger with no outlet. I saw an old lady suddenly appear. She even put on a high and mighty attitude. I was instantly filled with anger. She pointed at Grandma Smith. With a sharp voice, she asked, "Who are you? What right do you have to dictate here? This is my wedding with Michael. It's not a place for you to mooch food and drink. Please leave immediately." As soon as she finished speaking, Michael's face suddenly turned very ugly. He quickly grabbed Victoria's wrist. His tone revealed a hint of panic and anger. "Don't say anything. This is my grandmother." Victoria was taken aback for a moment. The expression on her face changed from anger to embarrassment. In the end, she forced out a flattering smile. She quickly released Michael's hand. She walked up to Grandma Smith. In a sickly sweet voice, she said, "Grandma, I'm sorry. I didn't recognize you just now. I'm Victoria, Michael's wife." Grandma Smith glanced at her. There was a hint of disdain in her tone. "Wife? How come I didn't know the Smith family had a granddaughter-in-law like you?" After saying that, Grandma Smith ignored the two people who were stunned in the distance. She turned to look at me. Her tone was a bit embarrassed. "Emily, I'm sorry for making you feel wronged." I shook my head. I whispered back to her, "Grandma, it's okay." William stepped forward. He gently supported Grandma Smith's arm. He said in a gentle tone, "Grandma, please don't be angry. Today is my wedding with Emily. Don't let these small matters ruin the mood." Grandma Smith nodded. She gently patted William's hand. Her tone softened a bit. "William, you are right. Emily is a good girl. You must take good care of her in the future." William nodded seriously. "Grandma, don't worry. I will definitely do it." Grandma Smith smiled with satisfaction. She turned to me and William and said, "Let's go. Don't miss the good time." I nodded, following William toward the center of the venue. Behind me, I vaguely heard Grandma Smith say to Michael, "Michael, you remember, this woman will never set foot in our Smith family if you insist on being with her. Then I would rather not have this grandson of the Smith family." Victoria's face suddenly turned pale. She opened her mouth, but didn't know what to say. Michael quickly stepped forward. His voice carried a plea. "Grandma, Victoria is young. She doesn't understand. Don't be angry. We haven't officially held the wedding yet, so..." Grandma Smith coldly smiled. She interrupted his words. "No wedding was held. Did you get a marriage certificate?" Michael's voice sounded a bit tense. "Grandma, I really didn't. I didn't marry her. It was just between her and me." I didn't hear the rest clearly. As soon as the wedding music started, William took my hand, and we slowly walked towards the stage. His hand was warm and strong. It made me feel particularly at ease. The wedding went very smoothly. William kept looking at me gently, as if I were the only one in his world. The moment the officiant announced we were officially husband and wife, I looked up at William. His lips curled up slightly. His eyes were full of tenderness. After the wedding, Michael and Victoria seemed to have disappeared from my life. Until recently, I accidentally heard news about Michael. He was kicked out by the Smith family. Life with Victoria has been very tough. Without the help and resources of the Smith family, Michael's career collapsed all of a sudden. He sold his car and house to pay off debts. In the end, even eating became a problem. What happened later? I sat on the bed, bored, continuing to ask. My hands were still flipping through the list prepared for the baby. William patiently massaged my legs at the foot of the bed. I've been pregnant for almost 6 months. I found myself relying on him more and more. I felt he wasn't pressing hard enough. I even gently kicked him once. William wasn't angry at all. He increased the pressure with his hands. That's when I understood. Love and indifference are actually quite obvious. Victoria left because Michael had no money. She left 2 months ago. She even aborted the child she was carrying. I heard she got married again a few days ago. This time, she married an older coal tycoon. I couldn't help but feel emotional after hearing that. It turns out Michael is quite similar to that older coal tycoon. No wonder everyone said I had poor taste before. It seems that way now. It's really quite disappointing. Time passes day by day. I've almost forgotten that anxious relationship. I just hope the baby in my belly is born safely. The next time I saw Michael was when I was 8 months pregnant, when I took the baby for a checkup at the hospital. That time, William didn't come because he had a meeting. He sent a little assistant to accompany me all the way. He sent countless messages, asking me to report my safety at all times. I smiled and replied one by one. Just as I walked out of the hospital gate, I saw Michael standing not far away. He looked quite haggard. His eyes were filled with exhaustion and regret. He didn't know how he found out I was at this hospital. When he saw me, Michael's eyes clearly lit up. I watched him walk closer step by step. I noticed he no longer had his usual sparkle. He was holding a few crumpled papers in his hand. The little assistant stood in front of me. Michael's expression suddenly became stiff. There was a hint of pleading in his voice. "Emily, I have pieced together all the drawings you made for me before. I know I was wrong. Can we try again?" Michael kept talking, but I looked at the snowflakes on the cuffs of his pants. Yet I was pondering inside. Did he take a taxi here, or did he ride a shared bike? Coming back to my senses, I sighed. There was not a trace of nostalgia in my eyes. "Michael, our relationship is over. I'm doing well now. I hope you won't disturb me again." A hint of despair showed in Michael's eyes. He seemed to have more to say. But at that moment, William's car appeared in the distance. I completely ignored him. I happily waved my hand in the distance. I casually said, "My husband is here to pick me up." Then I turned and left. Michael opened his mouth. It seems like he wants to keep me here, but in the end, he didn't say anything. In the car, William helped me fasten my seatbelt as usual. He checked it carefully, making sure the strap wouldn't press against me and the baby. Then he took hold of the steering wheel. He casually asked, "Who were you chatting with just now?" I stifled a laugh. I shook my head gently, "Just an insignificant person." William smiled slightly as well. "Let's go. We're going home." The car slowly drove out of the hospital. I leaned back in my seat, watching the scenery rush by outside the window. I felt particularly calm inside. The things that used to make me sad and wronged, now they have completely said goodbye to me. I understand. As long as William is by my side, every day in the future will be filled with happiness.